Picture this. After spending decades building up your IRA or your 401k, it's finally time to retire. Maybe you've saved 500,000, maybe a million, or even more. And when you check your statement, you feel such a sense of pride and relief. You did it. You hit your savings goal for retirement and you're on easy street. But here's something that most people don't realize. That number on your statement, it's not all yours because a significant portion of your IRA and 401k, it's going to go to the IRS. In fact, the IRS could take 30, 40, or even 50% of your hard-earned savings. But here's the good news, and this is what we want to talk about today. There are ways that you can significantly reduce these taxes in retirement, and it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, we thrive on simplicity here at B.O.S. Retirement Solutions and Advisors. So coming up on today's show, we're going to break down 3 critical strategies that could help you keep more of that hard-earned savings that you've worked so hard for and keep it in your pocket. And we're going to talk about, first, creating a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy. Second, we're going to talk about managing investment risk as you approach and enter into your retirement years. And third, why a Roth conversion is referred to as the Holy Grail for your retirement planning. And Ryan, we get excited about talking about all of this stuff, but especially when we talk about keeping somebody's hard-earned savings back in their own pocket, right?
Tyson, I always just think about if people could really stop and look at how much money they've paid in taxes. So when you think about federal income taxes, state income taxes, if you live in a state that has state income taxes, property taxes, taxes on your Social Security, taxes on Medicare, all these different taxes that just add up and compound. I was thinking of the Boston Tea Party, right? I mean, we started rioting in those early days of America. It's hard to believe we're about ready to celebrate 250 years here in America. But you think about how intentional those early founding families were about taxes. That's what started the Revolutionary War.
Well, no, it's for less taxes than we're paying now, right?
Way less. Way less. That's my whole point with this story. And now all of a sudden, we've just become accustomed. I was just standing at the gas pump, and I was looking at, we live in Utah. I was looking at the gas tax on every gallon, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like insane. And of course, we want nice roads, and of course, we want, firemen and police and schools and those things that we all benefit and we've benefited so greatly from as a community. But don't overpay. Don't overpay
Right.
what you have to pay. And, what's so crazy about this, Tyson, is so many people spend more time planning a vacation than they plan on just thinking about how they're going to create a tax efficient withdrawal strategy from what for most Americans is their number one savings vehicle, and that's their IRA or 401k. I mean, let's talk a little bit, Tyson, about, how the tax breaks worked when you started your IRA or 401k, but why Uncle Sam's not going to wait forever to collect his taxes.
The whole goal here at B.O.S. Retirement Solutions and Advisors is for us to create our own tea party every time we meet with a client, right? To help them to understand how to make sure that they minimize the taxes that they pay so they can celebrate. And this is all about creating, as you just mentioned, a tax-efficient withdrawal strategy for your IRA and your 401k. You've had some really nice tax breaks over the years as you've contributed to that IRA and that 401k. But Uncle Sam knows full well that at some point they're going to get taxes, and they hope that those taxes happen as you've hit the apex at the biggest amount of savings that you've ever had, and you start withdrawing that money because you think to yourself, well, I've done a great job saving, but you don't think about those taxes. So when you think about the how and the when you withdraw that money from your IRA and 401k, it becomes a big deal because if you don't understand how this works, you're going to be paying a lot more in taxes than you think. Specifically, if you don't have a strategy in place before you start withdrawing this money, the tax bill could end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you ever thought it would be. And we've met so many people who think to themselves and come in and actually tell us this. Well, we ask them the question, how do you want to start drawing down this money? What's your strategy? And they say, well, I'm going to wait, as an example, to take my Roth accounts first, and I'm going to take my tax deferred accounts and wait as long as I can. So in other words, I'm going to take my money that I don't have to pay taxes on first. And then as I get to required minimum distributions age, then that's when I'm going to start taking money out of my IRA and 401k. But you have no idea how much you're going to be paying in taxes, right? And especially when you think about what our national debt's at, Ryan. What's our national debt at right now? And where's it going?
Well, 38 trillion and climbing.
That's so crazy.
And I was just looking, Robert Kiyosaki had a post on social media that he gives this summary on what the cost is. This was a headline. He said, America spent $5.6 billion on munitions in the first 48 hours of the Iran war. I mean, think about that, $5.8 billion in the first 48 hours. And Pentagon sent an estimate to Congress this week, of what they're going to need. And so guess what, folks? I don't see that 38 trillion coming down anytime soon. With, what's happening right now. And what does that mean? It means us as American taxpayers, we're just watching this bill continue to go up and up and up. And so how can you Washington proof your retirement? Well, we would say, don't blindly follow, what you've just become accustomed to on the rules of thumb, like the 4% rule on how and when you're going to withdraw the money from your IRA and 401k. This is a strategy that was created 30 years ago. Think about that. 30 years ago, a lot has changed since the early 90s. And, there's definitely different approaches on how you're going to use a withdrawal strategy that works. But the strategy will ultimately depend on your specific situation. So don't expect Washington to save you. Don't expect somebody else to save you. This is one of those areas that you need to pay attention. And that's, Tyson, you talked about our mission. Our mission is to help families just like you, as you're listening, make informed decisions to be able to do this. And definitely having a tax efficient withdrawal strategy so that, it's not that you're going to avoid paying taxes. You're going to have strategy to be able to minimize those taxes. And, it's very, very important. And I think so many people right now, Tyson, are, there's a lot going on. We got the war, we got the Epstein files, we've got AI, we've got, unemployment. You're seeing some of these companies that are now laying off. We just saw recently, Square, 10,000 employees. They just fired 4,000 of those employees because they said, look, AI is, the CEO, Square, came out and said, I'm going to just come out and be bold here. We don't need all of these employees with the amount of lift that we can get from AI. They're technology based. And so, you take all these factors, and we don't want you to have fear about this. We want you to have confidence as you're navigating these different areas. And so I think, Tyson, this would be a good place to talk about risk, because your investment risks are also, with all these different things going on, we've enjoyed such a long period of market growth that could be changing.
Yeah, we've had over a decade of strong market growth. And so many times when you talk to somebody at the neighborhood picnic, or you run into somebody at the grocery store, or I was just recently on a flight and going on a little trip with my wife, and one of the stewardesses recognized who I was, and that I own B.O.S.S. And so she started bending my ear. She said, I've worked for this airline for 42 years. And I've been really fortunate to grow my nest egg a lot. And I talked about risk in this time that we had together. And I said, well, how much risk do you think you're taking? She's like, well, it's grown so much. I just can't imagine that I've got that much risk because my money's grown so well that even if I had a downturn, I don't think I'd lose that much. And in reality, most people overstate the confidence that they continue to have in the market. Because if she's been working at this airline as Delta for 42 years, it also means that she's close to retiring. And she told me she was. In other words, she wouldn't have, if the market had a 20, 30, 40% decline, she wouldn't have time for the market to bounce back. And even as she continued to contribute before she retires, and really what we're saying here is the rules change. A major market downturn at the wrong time could end up derailing your entire retirement plan. And so many people have gotten this complacency of expecting 15, 20% returns in their portfolios. And they forget that the closer you are to retirement, that the less time that you're going to have to recover from those losses. In fact, there's this article, Ryan, that I want to quote from CNBC. And it says this, and I quote, "Withdrawing money from your savings for retirement during a down stock market can be a game changer for Americans in their golden years," the American International Group Retirement CEO Jana Greer told CNBC. Greer cited a study that compared two people retiring just 2 years apart, the first one in a market downturn and the second in an upturn. She said the impact can be huge. 15 years later, if you look back, the person who retired and took withdrawals during that early period could have 2/3 less for the rest of their lives, end quote. So what are we really talking about here? We're talking about what we call sequence of returns risk. And you look at two people, the first one in a market downturn, the second one in an upturn. The one that retires in a downturn, if they have 2/3 less money, it's because as the market went down and then they need to start withdrawing money out of their account, they're paying taxes on that money. All of this ends up being a situation where they never get back to zero or back to where they were before. They just keep draining money out of that bucket, and that money gets drained a lot faster. That's where it really matters that you have a plan in place. It really matters that you understand where you are, not only from a sequence of returns risk, but an overall management of risk of making sure that as you get closer to your retirement date, you're taking less risk in the market as well, right?
Well, I just want to talk about risk in general. I have 4 sons, and I love to talk with my boys and teach them about investing and markets. And we were having a conversation yesterday, and I was talking about how fast people forget. And it wasn't too long ago. I mean, 2008, 2009 was the last really big permanent downturn. And it's like people have completely forgotten that. I mean, they'll talk about it and like, yeah, I remember that was a terrible time. But the question is, what are you doing about it to protect yourself? Because we've now gone from 2009 here to 2026, where the markets have been going up, real estate's been going up, and there's been a couple blips in there where the market's gone down, but didn't stay down for extended period of times. We had the COVID dip that was down over 30%, but then it came roaring back. And then we had, in 2022, we had the market was down and the bond market was down at the same time, which people think never happens, and it did. But in this particular conversation, I was having conversations with my boys, and I like to use real estate as an example because it makes sense, right? You live in a house and you see what values. And I think so many people have gotten accustomed to real estate only goes one way. Well, that's not true. There's been about every 18 years, there's a major adjustment in real estate. And so I thought, I'm just curious. I'm going to look at some data in the area where we live. And man, there were some big discounts going on. I showed them 3 examples of 3 homes in our area that had dropped in price. So from what the list price was to what the sales price was, the range was 20 to 30%.
Wow.
20 to 30% on these three homes. And I'm like, hey guys, here's just real life example. Everyone thinks it can only go one way, but these were upper end luxury homes, so they're in a market that's more expensive. But these were hundreds of thousands of dollars of discounts. And I think then you read the headlines right now. National builders right now, they are dropping their prices. They're offering additional incentives. They're saying, hey, I'll finish a basement for you for free. Folks, these are signs. These are like cracks in the foundation that are saying, hey, there's a shift that's happening in the market. And when it comes to risk, these are things that you need to pay attention to that are happening. Now, I'm not saying that the market's going to crash, but I haven't seen evidence like this, Tyson, since 2008, 2009 on price adjustments. And I'm just watching. That's why I was talking to my boys about this. And I'm just saying, guys, this is a time that the caution flag's up. You need to take a look. And where will the market go? Nobody knows for certain. But what you can do is this comes back to having a strategy and a plan for how you're going to take care of your complete financial picture. How are you going to take Social Security? How are you going to manage your IRAs and 401ks? How are you going to manage your investment risk? Do you have your estate plan in place? If one of you were to die, if let's say you're married and your spouse passes away, do you have a plan of how you're going to deal with that? These are all risk related questions. And Tyson, we always like to give some nuggets. Here's all the things that are happening. Here's some of the questions that are rolling around in my mind. What's one of our favorite strategies, Tyson, to help minimize risk?
As part of that, let me summarize what we've touched on. As we think about 3 ways to maximize your IRA or 401k, that's really what today's episode's about. The first one that we talked about was creating a tax efficient withdrawal strategy from your IRA, your 401k, your other retirement accounts. Second, we just got done talking about managing your investment risk, which no matter where it is, even if it's real estate, like Ryan was talking about, you got to manage it. The third one, and one of our favorite things to talk about, is to consider a Roth conversion when it relates to all your retirement accounts, because it effectively moves your retirement savings from tax deferred status in your IRA or 401k to tax-free status. In other words, what's going to happen is as you convert that money from that IRA or that 401k, you're going to pay taxes on that money. But the best news is you're going to pay it at 40-year lows. Right now we're at 40-year lows, and you can pay out of the account, your IRA or 401k account, or you can pay it from cash if you've got available. This powerful strategy is so big because we do it when taxes are effectively on sale. When we talk about 40-year lows, a lot of people don't believe it because they're still saying, well, it still feels like that I don't have enough at the end of every month. If you do this strategically, and while taxes are on sale, you're going to be paying taxes less on taxes than you would at any other time in your life. And here's the best part. Once you convert to a Roth, so you're not going to do this all in one lump sum. You're going to do this systematically. This is not a do-it-yourself project. We can help you to maximize the tax brackets and minimize the taxes you're paying. But once you convert to a Roth, your money could grow 10 times, 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times over, and you don't have to pay any taxes on any of that growth. And that's the opposite of the traditional IRA or 401k once you pull that money out. So the more your money grows in that Roth account, the more that you're going to be saving in the future on taxes versus the more the money grows in a traditional IRA or 401k, you're going to be paying a lot more in taxes in the future. We want to help you control what you can control right now. Ryan used the word Washington-proof, the phrase Washington-proof your retirement. That's what this is all about, is giving you your money freedom of how and when you spend that money in retirement. Let me give you an example. In your traditional 401k, if you wait until age 73 when you've got required minimum distributions, they force you to pay that money regardless of whether you need it or not. So let's say that you're 73 years old, you haven't even used any of that money yet, and now you have to pay taxes on that money, and the market has gone down by 10% that year. You not only lose the 10%, but you lose the future earnings on that money that you pull out as well, because you've now made your principal smaller. And on top of it, you have to pay taxes on it. So you have to withdraw even more to withdraw those taxes. And so with a Roth, if you prepaid those taxes at 40-year lows, it's grown, let's say, 100 times more than it did before. And then you withdraw those funds, you don't have a required minimum distribution. You don't have any taxes to pay. And so you can take that money out when you want or leave it in as long as you want. The best part, it's all tax free. And Ryan, let's talk about Peter Thiel for a second and how powerful this strategy really is.
I just told this story yesterday, Tyson, because someone was asking me about, I just don't feel like that there's any smart strategies. And so I told him the story of Peter Thiel. And I'm like, look, this is why strategy wins. Peter Thiel, for those of you who don't know, is the founder of PayPal. Forbes wrote an article on him that said how Peter Thiel accumulated $5 billion in a Roth IRA. He sat there when he was founding PayPal and he's like, okay, this company's not worth anything. But he had an idea and a vision. And when they created the shares, he got 1.7 million shares that he paid 0.001 per share. So you do the math on that. That's $1,700 for 1.7 million shares. Well, Peter's like, hold a second. Why don't I just buy this with my Roth IRA? And at the time, Roth IRA contribution limits were much lower than they are today, especially with a Roth 401k. But he took his self-directed Roth IRA, which he could completely do. He bought 1.7 million shares, his shares of PayPal, for $1,700, and then let that thing grow. Well, fast forward, those shares became worth more than 5 billion with a B, and he doesn't owe a dime of taxes on that growth. And some people are like, well, that's not fair. No, it was fair because he created the strategy and thought, hey, when this company's worth nothing, I'll go ahead and put that in there. And that's why we love that story, because the reality is, why not do the same thing for yourself?
That's right.
How can I use the strategies? So let's say I've saved $1 million in a 401k. How can I use strategies, do Roth conversion, get that money over there, make some good investments in my Roth account, and let that grow and compound tax-free? Let the withdrawals be tax-free. Let the income that comes out of that be tax-free. Pass it on to your kids tax-free. That's the power of planning.
Well, and let me just summarize this principle is that when we talk about taxes, whether it's an IRA or a 401k, the bottom line is with Roth is it's not about paying fewer taxes this year. It's about reducing the total amount of taxes you're going to be paying for the rest of your life. And that's why we feel like the Roth account is the holy grail of retirement planning is because it puts you in control. It puts you in the driver's seat of being able to Washington-proof your retirement. But here's the key. There's no one size fits all strategy. The best strategy is going to depend on your individual income, your savings, your timing for retirement. And that's why it becomes so important that we offer our podcast listeners a free B.O.S. Roth conversion analysis. Here's how it works. We get some basic information from you. We're going to run the numbers so you can see exactly what you'd be paying on taxes, not only if you stay in your current situation, but also how much you could be saving converting to a Roth. And we create strategies around how to minimize that as much as possible. That way, you know how much you're projected to save so you can make an informed financial decision that's really going to help you to understand what the power of this is. So if you've saved at least $300,000 or more for retirement, call to schedule your free B.O.S. Retirement Roth analysis right now at 800-769-7550, 800-769-7550, or simply click on the link in the show notes. These appointments are offered to our listeners on a first come, first served basis. And we've got a limited number of appointments that we can offer to you today. So, Ryan, all of this boils down to making informed decisions that help people to move forward in a powerful way, right?
That's right. And like we say all the time, Tyson, Washington proof your retirement. Uh, don't leave it up to chance. Retiring successfully, it doesn't happen by accident. It starts with a plan. That's why we created the B.O.S.S Retirement Blueprint. And be like Peter Thiel. Say, how am I going to get my money into my Roth? How am I going to make this so that I can enjoy a secure and independent retirement? And that's why we exist. That's why we love talking to you, helping you, arm you with the strategies, the holy grails, to be able to do everything and anything you want to do in retirement. So thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast, and look forward to connecting again soon. Have a great day.